IVM.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to one more episode of All Things Policy. Before we start, I have a small announcement. If you want to explore the domain of public policy, you can join one of Takshila's courses. The application for Takshila's next GCPP cohorts are on. The last date of application is 28th August. Please visit our website to find out more. Coming back where we left, in today's episode, we are going to talk about jobs in platform economy. In the last 1 year, Indian economy has contracted. People have lost jobs. There have been salary cuts, wage cuts. Amidst all this, a particular kind of worker, they have played a crucial role for the economy, for the society. I am talking about the platform workers. The platform economy, the platform workers ensured the continuous supply of different goods and services when the confinement measures were in place. They ensured movement of people, personnel, etc. And it's not that the platform economy emerged only during the time of the pandemic. The platform economy existed much before that. But its significance came to the forefront during the pandemic. In this episode, we will discuss about platform economy, its significance, its potential in terms of jobs creation. And to discuss this, we have a guest with us, Sri Lakshmi Ramachandran. Sri Lakshmi is a research manager at Ola Mobility Institute. She leads the Future of Work track at Ola Mobility Institute. She has a master's in development studies from IIT Madras. And Sri Lakshmi has recently co-authored a paper, Unlocking Jobs in the Platform Economy. I would highly recommend you to go through the paper. The link for the same has been shared along with the podcast. Hi, Sri Lakshmi. Welcome to All Things Policy.
Hi, Sarthak. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction and also inviting me here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Sri Lakshmi, I mentioned about platform economy workers multiple times in the introduction, but some of our listeners might have been using different platform services, but might be hearing these terms for the first time. So, since you have extensively studied this, you have researched on this, there can be some different kind of interpretations of this. So, can you give us some context about platform economy?
You're right, Sarthak. I think a lot of people do use platform services without realizing it, perhaps, and encounter platform workers on a very regular basis without, again, realizing it. I take a little bit of a step back here and, just perhaps start with what the platform economy is, which is an offshoot of the digital revolution of the 2000s. So early on, with internet reaching PCs in our living rooms, we saw online marketplaces springing up. For instance, early e-commerce companies are an example of that. But with smaller, cheaper devices and mobile internet proliferating across the country, we saw in the last decade that digital platforms with a mobile app interface have a lot of potential. These platforms have an uncanny ability to be local in their offerings and appeal. So, in the 2010 to 2020 decade, the last decade, digital platforms have effectively taken over. The demand for urban service providers has always, registered but remained unfulfilled. Till platforms aggregated this demand and showed service providers there is a market to be tapped into. There is a huge shift in how we live, move, and play in cities because of platforms, and that's the uh, broad introduction to what platform economy is. Now, the important thing, or like what defines platforms is that they have this ability to create value and streamline this value, which is a huge shift again for a disaggregated market in a developing economy context such as ours. So assurance of quality, assurance of safety, assurance of payment, and again access to regular work. These are all important features of the platform economy. We document a lot of these trends in the report that you mentioned. And we talk about further in this report how we really approach mass job creation through the platform economy and how that can be the decisive future for India.
So this is interesting in the sense that how platforms are connecting, right? So those who have demand for different kinds of goods and services, and those who are supplying different goods and services. Now, one thing that comes to my mind is what is the potential of platform economy in the sense that how many jobs can be created world over, or maybe India? Do we have any concrete studies on these things, or how much have you studied on these things?
So that is actually a first step that we are trying to address through the report that we released was to put a number to it. But then we've decided to stay away from that exercise because we found that there were a lot of these estimates that were being made anyway. So I wouldn't say this space is understudied at all. Many leading research organizations and consultancies are putting out different kinds of figures. But mind you, for India, the figures are always in the millions. So a recent report put that figure somewhere close to 20 million jobs by 2035. And that's a huge number. And I think it's something that a lot of policy think tanks also are striving to formulate methods to achieve 20 million jobs per year in India, etc. So, in terms of the scope of the platform economy itself, like I said, because they are able to aggregate jobs and cater better to localized demand, it makes a huge difference in just providing that information and addressing that informational asymmetry that's prevailing in our labor market right now. For instance, I know of a house painter that was unable to find work because of all the lockdowns we had to practice to combat the prevalence of, I mean, the spread of COVID last year. This person took on delivery work with a platform. This way, he was able to gain an income, work safely, and now since he's mostly associated with the delivery platform, he was able to get vaccinated through the platform's initiatives, which is, again, because delivery workers are frontline warriors, platforms are moving in that direction. So there are a lot of benefits associated with platform work. So the platform economy attracts workers from all walks of life, from a variety of skill specifications, and that becomes really important in its potential to create jobs en masse.
Okay, so so when I look at platform economy, or in terms of its job potential, right? So there are two things here. One is how much does platform economy attract laborers? That means whether people are willing to enter into platform economy, whether they want to provide different services. Second thing is how much is the platform economy going to expand over a period of time? Right. So first part is about supply of laborers to platform economy. Second thing is how much is the demand for workers in the platform economy going to increase. Now, for the supply part, as you mentioned, that it is attracting people from different walks of life. But if I look at this entire sector, they're not getting salaries. They're getting paid as per the kind of services that they provide. And again, it might not be something which is continuous, or which is something which is stable throughout the year. When you are having a regular salary, that means every month, at the end of the month, you'll get a salary. But when it comes to the platform workers, that might not be the case, right? So some months they might be getting a higher salary, some month they might not be getting that much amount of money. So there might exist certain amount of vulnerabilities. So, in your report, you have tried to tackle some of these things. How do you reduce some amount of vulnerability? You have talked about social security. So, what are some of the recommendations the government should take up to address this vulnerability that exists in terms of wages, or in terms of whatever money the platform workers make?
Right. So, Sarthak, I think you touched upon a few important and fascinating points. I think I would start by pointing out how we have a widespread informality trend in the labor market in India. And we all know like 92-93% of India's workforce is in the informal sector. So when we consider that as the mass job creator for the Indian economy, and we also remember the associated
Yeah.
insecurities with the informal sector, we can say that the platform economy provides a huge step up, and that is an important thing that we need to remember about platform jobs as well. I already mentioned a few features of platform jobs that are almost identical across sectors and platforms. There is the assurance of pay, assurance of work, assurance of safety on the job. Most platforms that, for instance, like ride hailing platforms, provide accidental cover and top up insurances, and also support asset maintenance.
Hmm.
So these are features that are simply absent outside of the platform economy. Now, coming to your question itself about what could be potential policy interventions that will make, say, platform work even more lucrative. I think the first step we have to acknowledge is what the government of India has done last year through the enactment of the Code on Social Security 2020. Now, this piece of legislation is truly, first in the world. They have recognized, to go on ahead and named platform workers and gig workers as, two new categories of workers that we never had, that a lot of other places, a lot of other jurisdictions simply don't have. This is important because by identifying platform workers and gig workers as separate um, types and emerging forms of work, we are able to recognize and protect them. Again, if you just compare it with the other efforts that are underway in different parts of the world, what we are seeing is that to have a, make them a particular status of worker with the company regularly, and hence give them benefits associated with the job, or make them completely independent of the company and hence deny any or all access to any kinds of benefits. So by recognizing, no, these are emerging forms of work, this is digitally mediated, this is very different from what we've known in the labor economy so far, that's a huge step to take in the right direction. So that's one thing that I would say has already happened in terms of a policy address for platform workers issues. The second thing is in operationalizing this code itself, right? So we have to look at social safety nets, such as what's guaranteed through family healthcare or a dignified retirement plan, etc. These are all costs that could be easily socialized rather than just be dependent on the workers' contribution or the job creators' contributions, etc. And again, the Code on Social Security achieves some of these ideals, which is to truly socialize Social Security with inclusion and equitability at the tenet as central tenets. So those are two quick policy prongs that I could perhaps touch upon. But if you're truly thinking innovatively, I would say we should leverage fintech and insurtech businesses that we have right now. Again, many digital platforms do offer fintech and insurtech services. So if we leverage those and offer benefits tailored to platform workers, it will truly dramatically improve financial inclusion. The thing is, we usually find platform workers unable to also access formal finance, and not just because they are platform workers, but because that's how our wider economy is structured. Platforms, though, mediate a lot of access to formal finance, but in order to truly unlock the huge need that's registered, not just for the platform workers, but also wider economy wide effects, we should address this whole digital financial inclusion aspect more seriously.
Yeah, so Sri Lakshmi, since we are talking about social security and we are talking about leveraging insurance tech and fintech, I had one question here. Related to policy interventions. At present, are there any such barriers which prevent platform workers from availing these services when it comes to insurance tech or fintech?
No, actually, no. That's the interesting bit to note, right? Currently, what we're seeing is platform companies working with each other. to provide and tailor these products for platform workers. So there is a lot of these cross-platform collaborations that are possible simply because on a fundamental level, platform providers work together and want to create the best work conditions for their associates as well. So many businesses that have sprung up recently exclusively target platform workers and work with other platform businesses and assure access to services like microloans, microcredit, um, and again small forms of insurance. So this is very a kind of a nice ecosystem coming together.
Okay. So, as in, if the government has to do something, so is there any such requirement, or is it something which is organic happening right now, and we don't need to bother much about it?
No, of course. I think there are some regulatory issues springing up as well, and quite a few financial markets as well as RBI related regulations have been emerging in this context. I think most of them are under review, so we would have to wait and watch. But there are some regulations coming in to understand this new financial landscape as well.
Okay. And you also mentioned about socialization of some of these benefits. So,
Right.
does that mean so basically who is going to contribute to that? So, I could not understand that model. So, is it from the taxpayers' money, or how is it going to happen?
So right now, what we see is only those workers engaged in an employer-employee relationship with their job creator are
Yeah.
able to avail of any kinds of social security in the
Yeah.
country. That's because social security is tied to your job status. So your worker classification and your association with your employer determines your access to family healthcare and retirement possibilities and plans, etc. We think that shouldn't be the case at all. And to move away from that model is the first step. So that requires, like I said again, unbundling social security from employment and also making the social security contributions wider with a wider catchment area of contributors. Now, this could take the shape and form of a lot of actors, including civil society organizations, NGOs, CSR contributions, and even, again, workers and taxpayers themselves. So there are a lot of funds that get earmarked in the government as well that do not find their designated destination, and they could also be redirected in order to provide social security benefits, because we know that at the end of the day the best form of social security is also letting people do whatever they want with their own money. It doesn't have to always be in the form of doles or some kind of it doesn't have to take some other shape.
Okay, so this means that the employers don't have to provide for social security. They might, but it's not a compulsion on the employers to provide for it. But it's largely the government which is trying to provide for it, and in some cases, maybe civil society organizations doing this.
So we would say rather that the leadership is taken by the
Huh.
government from the interest of a social welfare perspective, but employees, all kinds of people and entities and corporate citizens can contribute to this kitty. That's what we're
Okay,
saying.
so yeah, because I was asking this question because I mean, for a long period of time in India, right, the kind of social security that we provide or that we expect our employers to provide can have led to different kind of unintended consequences. Generally, the labor laws tend to be so restrictive that which prevents growth of businesses, right? So that's why I was asking this question, because if the employers are
Yeah, exactly. That's an important point to note, Sarthak. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's, I think, something that we really need to address quickly in this country. That is, I would identify it as the first barrier to um, formal job creation.
Yeah. So apart from this, you also have certain points related to upskilling. You have some points related to how women and people with disabilities can participate more in platform economy. So we'll discuss some of these points after the break.
Sure.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, we celebrate Cyrus's birthday with two very special guests, wife Aisha Barocha and dear friend Kunal Vijayakar. Marathi Kirkiton, our latest show, is all about Marathi culture, tradition, literature, cuisine, and more. To make your rainy day better, hear from Manik and Dr. Rajiv Deshmukh sharing their beautiful moments in this first episode. Journalist Kumi Kapoor joins Maruk Inayat on the note to talk about her new book on Parsis and their culture. To discover the fascinating story of Gautam Buddha, check out our history podcast, Echoes of India. In cricket, we have India's upcoming 5-match test series against England on the Edges and Sledges podcast. And you can learn all about the buy now, pay later industry with Nitya Sharma of Simple on Paisa Vaisa. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word about a podcast you love. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Seat, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, and CoinSwitch Kuber.
Coming back to where we left, so your report talks about a couple of things, right? One is you talk about how women and people with disabilities they can participate in the platform economy, or what sort of intervention should be there so that they can participate better. Now, again, this is a very interesting thing because if you look at some of the issues that people with disabilities face, uh, if you look at the definition of disability as per World Health Organization, they define it from a very social perspective that people with disabilities might have some physical impairments or mental impairments, but what is preventing them from participating in the workforce is the different kind of institutional barriers that exist, different kind of social cultural barrier that exist. And to a large extent, this is same for women as well. Women also face different kind of institutional barriers. And at present, women's labor force participation rate tends to be quite low in India. Compare it with some of the emerging economies, comparing it with some of the economies in our neighborhood. So, how can there be policy incentives, or how can there be some policy interventions which can address some of these social institutional barriers?
Right. So that's a very fascinating thing to consider. How women and persons with disabilities face similar barriers in accessing work across the economy, perhaps. So that we you first need to recognize and realize that women as well as persons with disabilities are agents of their own actions and can work in any sector or industry or form of job that they pick. That's usually something that I find absent in our larger public sort of consciousness as well. So starting from there, we can see that there are many aspects and features of the platform work that would particularly be appealing to concerns that women or persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups face in the conventional job market. So a key point would be flexibility in setting one's hours. Despite much progress that has been achieved, women still remain the primary caregivers of their families and are expected to perform caregiving duties at the drop of a hat on a very day to day basis. This really hampers their ability to commit to rigid job schedules. And we can see a lot of women dropping off the workforce when their care burden increases, attributable to the same reason.
Yeah.
Persons with disabilities find a little different kind of a barrier in that they need to work around conditions of work in order to make sure that they're able to perform both their job commitments as well as their personal commitments. And many infrastructures and other you know um ecosystem challenges prevent persons with disabilities from being able to be as efficient perhaps as their able-bodied counterparts. Now, the platform economy really offers, with this flexibility of work and hours, really changes that paradigm for women and persons with disabilities. So that's one key point I would, think about.
Yeah, but what I was thinking is how can the platform economies be promoted, or what kind of incentives should be provided to the platform economies so that more employment can be created for women, for people with disabilities? Is there any specific policy interventions that you have in mind?
So Specific to women, I think one sort of change has happened that I tracked maybe a couple of years ago. There was this
Yeah.
curious case of, for instance, you need to be eligible. I mean, you will be eligible for a license to drive commercially only
Yeah.
1 year after you have obtained your private driver license.
Okay.
This is a problem because most of the times, if you're just gaining a license to drive on a platform or any other kinds of driving work, you wait for another year.
Yes.
You either get rusty or you're no longer, interested in pursuing that vocation. So this was ruled as an arbitrary requirement, and the Supreme Court itself took out that requirement, saying, the ministry cannot enforce these kind of arbitrary rules. That has really unlocked the opportunity for women to come into the platform economy as driver partners in ride hailing platforms. That's just one instance of identifying one barrier to entry for work and unlocking it for one group. And that's, one example I can think of. Coming to what we need more, perhaps, is, for instance, when it comes to disability friendly workplaces, be it in the platform economy as well. Sensitization is of paramount importance. Um, Many platforms have also actively employed partners from various kinds of disability communities in order to staff roles that may, accommodate their disabilities well. So those are also welcome interventions from the platform side, and tying with sector skill councils, the relevant sector skill councils at the government level, upskilling persons with disabilities to this end can prove, a massive unlock of job opportunities for persons with disabilities.
Yeah, and apart from that, what I mean, I was just thinking about it is maybe government can promote a certain percentage representation of women or people with disabilities in different forms. And if you are having that minimum threshold, then maybe some form of incentives can be there.
It is something, yeah. Incentivizing women and persons with disabilities to voluntarily join platforms is definitely a great idea. But again, the thing is, we have to really, really insist and focus our energies on skilling,
Yeah, yeah.
because platform economy is an economy of skills.
Yeah. So again, when it comes to skilling, you also have some recommendations, right? And skilling is something which is very, very important in the context of India, where hardly some 4 to 5% of the people who are employed in the labor force are go through vocational training courses. They have those vocational training compared to countries like South Korea, where almost around 95-96% of those who are in the labor force have the right kind of skills. So again, when it comes to skilling, do you see any specific model here, where do you see any specific government's role?
The government does remain the largest provider of skilling and vocational training in our country. So we are working actively with the government in many ways to ensure that skilling programs take into account the needs of the platform economy as well, identify platform jobs as a potential post skilling placement avenue, and truly revamp some of these skilling programs in order to make sure that young people look at platform jobs as also aspirational and worthy of pursuit
Yeah.
after they finish a skilling session.
Yeah, so again, skilling and job creation, all these things have to go hand in hand, or else if you're providing skills but you don't have the right kind of jobs, it can lead to again different kind of unintended consequences. So all these recommendations that we were talking about, so what they are trying to do is they are addressing the supply side, right? So how can you ensure that more people are attracted towards platform economy and they join platform economy, they provide their services. Now another angle here is the demand side, right? So how much will platform economy grow over a period of time? How can platform economy grow over a period of time to accommodate these people who are willing to join platform economy? So at present, do you think there are any barriers or is there any scope for the platform economy to grow further?
Absolutely, for sure. There's always room for the platform economy to proliferate, especially given the fact that our proportion of informal workforce is only steadily growing, and that hasn't reversed course yet so much. In our official estimates yet. Um, that's just one indicator, though. Mostly, the platform economy has room to grow and expand, has deeper markets to penetrate because we are a country of 1.2 billion people and at least 200 cities. And if you look at platforms as a distinctly urban phenomenon too, that's a huge market to serve. So, and every day, even I'm surprised by the kind of innovative sectors in which platform companies have sprung up. And every day, I learn about a new kind of platform that's offering a particular kind of service, and I'm just like, whoa, why did we take this long to think about it? So there's always it's a, again, as much as it is a marketplace of skills, it's also free for all ideas floating around in the platform economy. But from the policy perspective, if you were to truly unlock what the platform economy can offer, I think there is some sort of financialization of the everyday that can really, really help us expand the scope of the platform economy. Specifically, if you look at again, ride sharing platforms or even delivery platforms to a certain extent, asset ownership is a huge aspect. It's a huge sort of determinant of if we can participate in the platform and gainfully uh, gain an income through this platform. In another white paper that we recently launched, we also identify human skill as an asset. So if you were to count that as well, almost all platforms have monetizable assets being put to use, and investing in each of these assets and linking financial programs that enable easier investment in these assets can really make a huge difference. When it comes to hard traditional assets such as vehicles or real estate, etc., that we see also being shared in the platform economy. We can look at cash flow based lending as a huge unlock aspect. It's a simple change to our lending model, even if it's for small amount loans. That makes a huge difference. Our formal lending institutions do not necessarily provide cash flow based lending for all income groups, and that's a sad reality, I would say, because a lot of low income earners can benefit from asset ownership, and that's a legacy of studies that say that asset ownership really makes a huge difference to your economic status. So when asset ownership is hindered by the lack of another asset collateral, it's a kind of a loop that we're in. And to break out of it, we really would like to see cash flow based lending rolled out to a variety of earning groups, and that could change the game. Even for the explosion of platform jobs, that could be a real game changer.
Thanks, Sri. This was really interesting because so we have assets. You have to monetize these assets. So this is the demand part can be taken care by this. And again, all the recommendations that you talked about, how you can bring about some sort of reforms when it comes to social security, how we can upskill our population, how we can use our human resources better, people with disabilities, women who are not participating in the workforce, how we can ensure that they participate in the workforce, and how platform economy actually provides them the right kind of platform. So this is the supply side. So I think the demand and supply both meet here, and this is where the potential of the platform economy when it comes to jobs can be unlocked. So this was really an interesting conversation with you, Sri, and you covered all the different aspects.
Thanks, Arthur. It was super interesting to talk to you as well. I'm so happy that we got to sit down for this.
The pleasure is ours. So thanks to your listeners for tuning in. We'll meet again in one more episode of All Things Policy. Thanks a lot.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
And sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Natasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point.
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station, and hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.